I'm really excited to be joined by our two guests today, Dr. Julienne Bower, Professor of Psychology and Psychiatry at UCLA, and her close collaborator, Diana Winston, who is the Director of Mindfulness Education at UCLA's Mindful Awareness Research Center. I'm going to introduce our guests in just a minute, but I want to begin by reflecting on the time of year and the place we are, and particularly Mother's Day holiday, and celebrating Mother's Day or acknowledging Mother's Day in the context of a pandemic. Mother's Day is a time of celebration, but it's also for many of us a time of sadness or grief if we've lost someone either to breast cancer or potentially this year to COVID-19 illness. So with that introduction, I'd like to welcome our guests and ask each of you to introduce yourselves. And Dr. Bauer, if we could start with you, introduce yourself to our audience.
Sure, yeah. So again, my name's Julie Bower and I'm coming from UCLA. And I just want to say how delighted I am to be here. I am so grateful for the support that we've gotten from BCRF over the years for our research. It is an incredible community and I'm delighted to do whatever I can to give back even a little bit to these incredible people who are part of BCRF. So my research focuses on links between stress and the immune system and the relevance of that for women who are facing breast cancer as well as breast cancer survivors. So we're all thinking a lot right now about our immune system and the importance of our immune system for fighting against viruses. We also know that the immune system plays a role in cancer development and progression. So our research has really been trying to understand how stress can get inside the body to influence our immune cells and how that's relevant for the growth and progression of cancer, but also for antiviral immunity as well. So we're very interested also in how we can help people reduce stress, but also reducing stress is not the be all and end all, and sometimes there's not much we can do if we're in a very stressful situation. We can also enhance our positive emotions. So even in the face of tremendous stress, we can be thinking about how to increase happiness, how to increase joy, feelings of social connection, meaning and purpose in life. And so those are also a really important part of our research program.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing more about that. Diana Winston, I know you're a close collaborator and you've designed some of the programs that Dr. Bauer uses in her research. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do and your interaction with Dr. Bauer and her team?
Sure. Well, thank you also for inviting me here. Happy to be here. I am the director of mindfulness education at our Mindful Awareness Research Center. And so we've had a center at UCLA for about 14 years where we've done education and research on the topic of mindfulness. And so that means lots and lots of classes, education for the general public within UCLA. We're located in the medical school, so we offer a lot within the UCLA health system, and then in wider ways throughout campus, and actually globally we have classes and events and programs for anyone who wants to participate. We have a program called MAPS, Mindful Awareness Practices. It's a 6-week introduction to mindfulness, and that's been adapted in a number of different studies. And I've been working closely with Julie in this study, the studies connected to breast cancer using our MAPS program.
Wonderful. So before we get too far into the conversation, we hear a lot about mindfulness. We've heard it several times so far. Can you just explain to us what we mean when we're talking about mindfulness, and then maybe from that, when we hear the mind-body connection or mindfulness, mind-body intervention, what does that encompass?
Well, I'll start with mindfulness and then Julie go into the larger question. But mindfulness, the way I define it, is paying attention to our present moment experiences with openness and curiosity and a willingness to be with that experience. So it's really about helping ourselves come into the present moment. If you were to check into your mind at any point in the day, it's probably lost in the past or lost in the future. Worrying about something that happened, replaying it, worrying about what's coming up, going into the worst case scenario, especially now, right? Of course. So mindfulness is this invitation to come back into this present moment and to connect with ourselves in a way where we can see that actually I can be okay. I can take a breath, I can pause, I can come into this moment. And this is a skill that can be trained. So it's trained through a meditation practice that we like to teach students, and it becomes something that's useful both as a meditation and in the midst of our daily life.
Oh, that's wonderful. I look forward to hear more about that. I could use some of that. So Julie, touching on the mind-body intervention, what does all that encompass, and particularly in the context of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so mind-body interventions is kind of a broad umbrella, and it includes mindfulness and other forms of meditation. Also things like yoga and Tai Chi, Qigong, relaxation techniques, acupuncture, chiropractic interventions. So again, very broad umbrella. The work we've done has focused on a couple of those approaches, mindfulness in particular, but also Tai Chi and yoga. And really the kind of approach that we use depends on the problem that we're dealing with. So we really came to mindfulness when we started a program of research with younger breast cancer survivors. And we were really trying to think about how to enhance well-being and long-term survival in younger women. And at that point, there were really not so many interventions that were targeted specifically for younger women, that were really thinking about their needs. And so we did focus groups and we looked at the literature and we were trying to figure out what's really most relevant for these women? What can we offer them? And what they told us and what was really striking in the literature was how stressed and depressed they were. Mm-hmm. And I think, again, those are endemic problems exacerbated in our current situation, but are really particularly problematic in younger women. So when we then looked at kind of our menu of different approaches, what can we do for these women? I had done previous studies of yoga for women who were experiencing fatigue after breast cancer. That was a great intervention for cancer-related fatigue. For stress, we chose mindfulness, and that's when we started collaborating with Diana and the Mark Center. And I think we've been really impressed with how effective mindfulness has been in both reducing stress, but also kind of promoting a lot of other positive psychological processes, improving sleep, etc. And I'm happy to talk more about that, but that's kind of how we've had our current focus on mindfulness.
So I know that your research has also focused on sort of the biological impact of stress. And particularly in breast cancer patients and survivors. So what do we know about how stress impacts our bodies, our biological systems? And I think, inflammation and immunity come to mind.
Exactly. Yeah. So we kind of tend to take for granted now this idea that stress affects the immune system. But really, the origins of that work are fairly recent. It was really in the 1980s that the first rigorous studies of stress and immune function in human came about. And in those initial studies, they found that individuals experiencing kind of a range of stressors. They did one sequence of studies with students who were going through medical exams. So, very stressful, but not life-threatening. They also looked at individuals who were caregiving, for example, for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease, which is a very severe chronic stressor. They also looked at folks who had experienced a bereavement. And all of those contexts that they found that the individuals who were going through these stressful experiences had decrements in their immune response. They showed evidence of a kind of less healthy immune system. So since that time, work has really exploded, and we have a much richer understanding of how these systems are linked to each other. And it's actually quite remarkable how closely our stress response systems are linked to our body's immune system. So stress influences what kind of immune cells are made, where they go in the body, what they do when they get there. And so, as you said, Margaret, we've been really interested in how this plays out in the context of breast cancer, and we're really interested in the role of inflammation in tumor progression. So we've been doing things like studying how does stress affect, cells that are in breast tumors, immune cells that are in breast tumors, and the characteristics of those cells.
For those of us who maybe aren't accustomed to incorporating a mindfulness awareness into our routines, I'm a perfect example of that. How might someone get started incorporating that behavior into their lives? And is there a particular practice that might be a good place to start?
Absolutely. So mindfulness can be practiced by anyone. It's like anything, you have to want to do it and to keep going with it in order for it to see effects of it. But if you are interested and curious about practicing mindfulness, I suggest that people start out with even just 5 minutes a day. Everybody has time for 5 minutes. And so the idea is you might find a place that you can be quiet. For some of us, that may not be possible in our homes these days, but trying to find some place where we won't be disturbed. And then there's just a basic practice of feeling our breathing in our body and noticing the breath, and when our attention wanders, bringing it back. And then just kind of keep doing that over and over. Now, it's hard to do it without a little bit of support. And that's why there's lots of ways to listen to guided meditations, which I think is a really good way to get started. So we have an app, UCLA Mindful, where people can listen to 5-minute meditations, 10-minute, 20-minute. It's also on our UCLA Mark website. So that's one way that might be helpful to support people. And I also want to encourage people, if they're practicing mindfulness, just to know that sometimes we get discouraged because our minds are wandering, and we're thinking that we're supposed to have this perfectly quiet mind with nothing going on, but that's not at all what happens. What happens is we sit down and we get to see what's really going on, and there's all of our worries and concerns and grief and so forth. And so it's just a matter of noticing that's happening, not making that be a problem, but just coming right back again and again to the present moment, to our breathing usually. And over time, this skill gets easier. We find we can do it. It's almost like developing a muscle at the gym. At first it's hard, but it gets easier over time.
I want to jump in and talk a little bit about mindfulness from the scientific perspective. So we hear a lot of hype about mindfulness, and so it's good for us to be skeptical and look carefully at the evidence base for some of these approaches. And there's actually very strong and compelling evidence that mindfulness does reduce stress and depression. So as Diana said, even these little 5-minute practices can help kind of calm our minds and bodies. But it actually has a broader spectrum of effects, which is why we're so excited about it as a technique. It can improve sleep, which is critical for our mental and our physical well-being. Sleep and the immune system are tightly connected to each other. One of the best things we can be doing for ourselves is getting a good night's sleep, which mindfulness can help with. And also, mindfulness enhances positive emotions, which, as I said before, we know are also really important for both our mental and our physical health. So in our studies with women with breast cancer, we found that mindfulness reduces stress and depression, and that's great. But it increases positive affect, it increases self-kindness, it increases women's feelings of peace and meaning in life. And it turns out that those are the things that are actually more closely tied to beneficial changes in your immune system. So again, this importance of positive emotions and the way these mindfulness techniques can help us enhance our positive emotions, I think is really critical. So there are mindfulness techniques that you can use to calm your mind and body, be focused on the present moment. One of my favorites is actually a loving kindness meditation, where you're sending loving kindness out to a person, an animal, someone in your life, and having that come back on you.
That's wonderful. That is very encouraging. Well, thank you both again. It's really been wonderful talking to you.